Dr. Jakob Begun.
We are gastroenterologists from Australia. Today we are going to talk about microbiome, which is a very, very hot topic. And we have an expert here with us, which is Dr. Jakob Begun. He's also an associate professor at Marine Research Institute, which is affiliated with the University of Queensland. He leads our IBD group, and his translational research laboratory is really focused on interaction between microbiome and immune system. So I think he will be the perfect person to talk about this topic.
Thank you.
So Jake, a lot of people do ask about microbiome and really lacks understanding of exactly what it is. So can you just define the term microbiome and walk us through that?
Well, it is a term that's used a lot in the lay press, in the media, in the medical community. And what does it really mean? So the microbiome encompasses all of the microbes that live on us and within us. And that includes bacteria, the main constituent, but also fungus and viruses. And these bacteria live on many different surfaces of our body. They live in our ears, on our eyes, in our mouths, and the vast majority of them live within our gut, where the bulk of the biomass is. There's about 3 kilos of microbiome in the average individual.
So a lot of people are then asking that microbiome really consists of our human being altogether, but does it really impact on our health? And that's where they're really curious about. And since this is a GutTalk TV, for our audience purpose, how does the microbiome affect our gut health?
And that's probably where the biggest effect of the microbiome is, in the gut, both because that's where most of the microbiome biomass is within our gut, but also because the gut and the microbiome have an intimate interaction inside the gut. They're very close together, mere microns between them. The bacteria, through their metabolism, are constantly secreting signals that are going out, chemicals and other molecules that are being secreted, and they interact with our gut. They interact with the lining of our gut, which is called the epithelial cells, and they have effects there. They interact with the immune system that's intercalating into the gut, and they affect the immune system, what I study in my laboratory. And they also affect the nerves that are innervating the gut. And those nerves are sensing things in the environment and transmitting that information back up to the brain, and so that's the basis of the gut-brain axis. And a lot of microbial signals are going up that axis.
So what, depending on what microbial population you have in your gut, really depends on whether you have healthy gut health, or versus you have some disease developed from that properly. So for the people out there, they're then worried about, okay, how do we make this optimal? So first question might be, if I use antibiotics which get rid of certain population in your gut, is that harmful?
So let me unpack that question. So first, when we want to talk about a healthy gut microbiome, what is that? So there have been lots of studies that have been done now looking at a variety of diseases that have all found that there are differences in the gut microbiome of people who have healthy microbiomes and those who have disease. And what we find in many chronic diseases is that the diversity of microorganisms in the gut is reduced. So reduced diversity of the gut microbiome is associated with disease, and a good diversity of microbiome is usually associated with good health. Antibiotics are antibacterial. They kill off bacteria, so they tend to decrease the diversity of the microbiome. So yes, antibiotics can have a big effect on the microbiome. They tend to decrease diversity, and there have been studies showing that childhood exposure to antibiotics at least can be associated with autoimmune conditions and immune-mediated diseases later in life. Now, I don't want to give people, though, out there the impression that antibiotics are all bad, because obviously you need to take antibiotics sometimes if you have bacterial infections so they can kill those bad bacteria. But it does have an effect on the microbiome.
Then, to our next question, which is the most asked question in my clinic, is does prebiotic and probiotic help my microbiome? And which one should I take? So what do you usually advise your patient about that question?
Well, it seems like a great idea. You're taking an antibiotic that's killing off bacteria, so I'll take a probiotic at the end of that antibiotic course to replenish everything. And unfortunately, even though it looks really good on paper, it doesn't pan out when you look at the research. And why is that? Maybe it's just a numbers game. So even in the strongest probiotics that are out there, there might be 5 billion organisms. Sounds like a lot, 5 billion, but that's in a sea of 100 trillion bacteria that we have in our gut. So it's literally a drop in the bucket. And that might be why it doesn't have the beneficial effects. The other thing might be that there's just not enough different species of bacteria in those probiotics. So you might only be getting 10 or 15 species, and really what you need are hundreds. So for those reasons, probiotics don't seem to have the effects that we want. However, prebiotics have been a interesting area of research lately that have a lot of promise. Prebiotics are the foods that we bring into our body, and they have a big effect on our microbiome. In fact, when you look at the studies, it might have the biggest effect of anything on the microbiome.
So when they do ask, okay, what kind of diet then that will be helpful for improving my microbiome, what do you usually advise your patients?
So the major mass of microbes in the gut are in the lower gut, the lower intestine. So in the upper intestine, we digest our food and we absorb it. And then in the lower intestine, what's left over is what feeds the bacteria. So those bacteria are feeding on insoluble fiber in our diet that we can't digest. Those are things in green leafy vegetables, other fiber-rich foods, and things like psyllium husk, metamucil, benefiber, those sorts of supplements. But also acid-resistant starches, which can be found in foods like bananas or chilled potatoes and many other foods. And these tend to cause a diverse microbiome that's a quite healthy microbiome, and so that's what I'm telling my patients. If they really want to work on their microbiome health, they should be upping the insoluble fiber and increasing those acid-resistant starches.
So we have a lot of curious audience out there. So when they suffer from gut health for a prolonged time, then they try to find answer for their problem. So what they end up doing is go out there and find a test that tests microbiome. So they usually come with the result, but I just want your expert opinion on the testing of microbiome and how useful it is at this stage.
Yeah, so the testing of the microbiome has changed a lot over the last 10 years. It used to be that we would send a sample off to the lab, they would try to grow up a few different bacteria, and they would tell us if there were any pathogenic bacteria in there. Nowadays, microbiome testing is a DNA-based technology. They give you a list of hundreds of different species of bacteria that are in the gut and the relative abundance of each one of those bacteria. And it can be an overwhelming amount of information for us as healthcare practitioners to deal with, and also patients. And I think the next revolution in microbiome is going to be taking all of that data and organizing it in a way that can really be helpful for us making clinical decisions. So there are some patients who come in with their microbiome analysis and it is very abnormal and there's something wrong, often because of some other underlying health condition. But a lot of people come in with microbiome which is just a little less diverse than average, or it has a little bit more of one species than another, and it can be really difficult to make decisions based on that. I think the focus is on diet, and as we accumulate more and more research on the effects of diet on the microbiome, I think we're going to be able to give a lot better advice from these microbiome analyses moving forward.
That's right. I think we are not at the prime time where we can just advise patients, let's go out there and do the test. However, by observing some of my patients, what I realized was before the intervention with a dietitian, they have a very low diversity, but when they did right practice with the dietitian, when they repeated the test, definitely there's an increase in diversity, and that helped with their symptom. So yes, it's not to prove how you improve, but definitely what we are trying to get back to is that prebiotic concept that Jake has talked about. Definitely what you put in will have impact on microbiome, and having the right diet is important.
Absolutely.
So Jake does go through more detail about microbiome on his interview with Genius Podcast. I share the link below, so you can click on there and it will take you to that channel, which will be useful for you if you have more questions on microbiome. But we'll come up with more videos on microbiome, so stay tuned and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, which will update you whenever we put the videos up. And if you have any questions, please leave a comment below. Thank you.
Thank you.